You know that specific kind of suburban silence on a Saturday morning. The one that's not actually silent, but filled with the drone of a dozen lawnmowers all humming in slightly different keys, creating this symphony of domestic obligation. That was my world, me Caspian Shaw, king of a quarter acre of meticulously mediocre turf. I was just out there, doing the dad bod shuffle behind my trusty Honda mower, sweating in the sun, thinking about absolutely nothing more profound than whether I should edge the driveway before or after I crack open a beer. Then a glint, it wasn't a bottle cap or a piece of foil, it was different. I killed the engine, the sudden quiet ringing in my ears, and knelt down. Parting the blades of grass, I found it. A key, not a modern car key or a simple house key. This thing was old, ornate, made of what looked like actual silver tarnished in the crevices. And engraved on its head in elegant, looping script were the initials. CS my initials, Caspian Shaw. I'm not a superstitious guy. I'm a project manager for a company that sells industrial shelving. My life is a series of spreadsheets and predictable outcomes. But holding this impossible object in my hand, I felt a weird jolt, like static electricity to the soul. I stood up, staring at the key, my brain doing this frantic, useless reboot, and that's when it happened. Across the fence at Gwendolyn's house, the quiet lady with the unsettlingly cheerful garden gnomes, her back door, the one that led to her kitchen, the one that was always shut tight, groaned. It swung inward slowly, deliberately, opening into the darkness of her house. A faint breeze stirred the leaves around my feet, but it wasn't strong enough. It couldn't have been. I froze. Mower half finished, key clutched in my sweaty palm, staring at an open invitation that absolutely positively could not be for me. But the universe, in its infinite and apparently idiotic wisdom, had just handed me a key with my name on it and opened a door. And all I had wanted to do was mow the damn lawn. The next few days were not my finest. That key didn't go into a drawer, oh no. It sat on my kitchen counter right next to the fruit bowl like a tiny silver judgment. Every time I walked past, it seemed to wink at me. It was a question, a dare, and a threat all rolled into one. My lawn remained half-mown, a perfect visual metaphor for my fractured sanity. I started calling in sick to work. My boss, bless his spreadsheet-loving heart, probably thought I had the flu. The truth was, I had a terminal case of Gwendolynitis. My life devolved into a low-budget spy movie directed by a paranoid schizophrenic. I became an expert on the subtle topography of my own window blinds. From my living room, I had a perfect oblique view of her backyard, and what I saw did not help, not at all. On Monday, she spent the morning arranging these smooth, dark stones in a spiral pattern around her birdbath. A normal person would see a decorative touch. My brain, now powered by cheap coffee and pure anxiety, saw the construction of a ritualistic energy vortex. What was she summoning? Why a spiral? Was it a cosmic drain? Was my soul the clog it was meant to clear? On Tuesday, I saw her walking through her prize-winning rose bushes, muttering to them. Not just cooing like you do to a pet, but having what looked like a full-blown, one-sided conversation. Her hands would gesture, her brow would furrow. She was communing with her floral familiars, obviously. She was getting instructions from the thorny beyond. I couldn't hear a word, which was somehow infinitely more terrifying. Whispered secrets are always worse than shouted ones. Wednesday night was the kicker. I saw a flickering light in her kitchen window, the same one connected to the door that had opened. It wasn't the steady glow of a light bulb, it was a candle, then another one lit up, and another. Soon her whole kitchen was bathed in this soft, wavering light. I imagined her in there, hunched over a bubbling cauldron, the silver key the final ingredient she needed for something bad. The faint scent of what I now believe was probably lavender wafted over the fence, and my mind immediately translated it to exotic, probably illegal sacrificial incense. Every innocent act, seen through the lens of that key, became another piece of a puzzle I was horrifyingly at the center of. The breaking point came on Thursday, trash day, the one unavoidable face-to-face interaction mandated by the gods of suburban sanitation. I saw her wheeling her bin to the curb at the same time as me, and my heart did a frantic little tap dance against my ribs. Play it cool, Caspian. You are a normal person who manages shelving projects. You are not a character in a bad horror movie. Morning, Gwendolyn, I chirped, my voice an octave too high. She turned, a polite but distracted smile on her face. She looked normal, tired, maybe a little stressed, but not like a high priestess of some dark floral cult. Oh, Caspian. Good morning. This was my chance, my one shot to gather intel without resorting to night vision goggles I'd been looking at on Amazon. Busy week? I asked, trying for casual. Her eyes lit up, but in a way that didn't feel comforting. It was a focused, almost feverish glint. Oh, you have no idea, she sighed, pushing a stray strand of gray hair from her forehead. It's all coming down to the wire. The annual gala is just around the corner, you know. Gala, my mind raced, code word, definitely a code word. I've just been working nonstop to get everything ready, she continued, lowering her voice conspiratorially. The timing has to be perfect. I just hope the little guys can win over the judges this year. They deserve it. She then looked me straight in the eye, gave a little wink, and said, "It's all about the presentation after all." And then she walked back to her house, leaving me standing there by my recycling bin, a cold sweat trickling down my spine. The little guys, what in the ever-loving hell were the little guys? Gremlins, imps, some kind of diminutive, summoned demons, and judges. Was this some sort of infernal competition? A dark tribunal deciding the fate of our neighborhood, and I, Caspian Shaw, holder of the key, was somehow slated to be the presentation. The sheer, unadulterated panic was so intense it was almost comical. I stumbled back inside, the plastic wheels of my bin rattling like a death march. Update. Okay, so I talked to her. I went back inside, my brain feeling like a dial-up modem trying to load a 4000 video, and in a moment of sheer, unadulterated desperation, I did what any socially anxious person in the 21st century would do. I made a vague, anonymous post about it on the town's community forum. I thought maybe someone would say, "Oh, that's just Gwendolyn, she's quirky," and I could go back to my half-mown lawn and my boring life. That is not what happened. The post blew up and the comments section is now a swirling vortex of my worst nightmares. There's one user, let's call her Crystal Whisperer 74, who is absolutely 100 convinced that Gwendolyn runs a local coven. She's telling me the little guys are obviously homunculi, and the judges are elder witches who come to assess the new creations. She advised me, with terrifying sincerity, to check Gwendolyn's fence for occult symbols and to put a line of salt across my doorway. I don't even own any salt besides the iodized stuff in a cardboard cylinder. Is that powerful enough? Does it have to be sea salt? Then you've got the opposite end of the spectrum. Just the Facts Frank is tearing me a new one, telling me to touch grass and that it's obviously a bake sale committee or a garden club. He says I sound unhinged. And maybe he's right, but his smug certainty is infuriating because he can't explain the key. He can't explain the door swinging open. He just glosses over the parts that don't fit his neat little world. The worst, though, was a private message. Some true crime obsessive sent me a link to a documentary about a cult in Oregon. "Read this," the message said. It started with a charismatic old lady, a special community project, and weird deliveries in the middle of the night. I haven't seen any weird deliveries, but now you can bet I'll be sitting by my window all night, every night. And through all this, the key is just sitting here on my counter. I swear to God, I picked it up a minute ago and it felt warm. Not hot, but like it had been sitting in a sunbeam, even though it's been in my dark kitchen all day. I held it in my closed fist, and the metallic coolness I expected just wasn't there. It felt alive. I know how that sounds. I'm starting to doubt my own senses. People keep saying, just call the cops, but I actually played out that conversation in my head. 911, what's your emergency? Yes, my neighbor is being vaguely ominous about her hobbies, and also I found a key that fits my initials but not my locks. I can already hear the dispatcher's weary sigh. "Sir, has she threatened you?" "No," she winked at me. "They'd put me on a watch list. I'm stuck. I'm completely, utterly stuck in this suburban nightmare, and the only evidence I have is a weird key and a forum full of lunatics." My paranoia found a new partner in crime on Friday, Dave, our mail carrier. Dave's been on this route for 20 years. He's less a civil servant and more a walking, talking archive of suburban secrets. He knows who's feuding over property lines, who orders too many packages from questionable websites, and who's about to go through a messy divorce, all based on the ebb and flow of their mail. He's a gossip-fueled version of the neighborhood app, and I was about to exploit his encyclopedic knowledge. I saw his little white truck pull up and timed my approach perfectly, making it look like I was just coincidentally getting my mail at the exact same moment. "Hey Dave, how's it going?" I said, my voice slick with a fake nonchalance that I'm sure was completely transparent. "Same old Caspian, bills and junk mail, the circle of life," he grunted, handing me a stack of envelopes that felt utterly insignificant in my trembling hands. "Say Dave," I began, leaning against my mailbox as if this were a normal, everyday conversation. "You deliver to Gwendolyn next door, right? She seems really wrapped up in something lately." "Super busy." Dave stopped sorting his letters, pushed his cap back on his sweaty forehead, and let out a low whistle. "Oh, Gwen, you can say that again, she's in the zone. You don't want to get in her way this time of year, it's a whole production." He gestured vaguely with a crate and barrel catalog towards her house. "The whole shed is packed to the gills with her little treasures. Told me yesterday she was up all night getting them polished up for the final judgment." He chuckled, a deep, rumbling sound that did nothing to calm my racing heart. She's a character, that one. Every year it's the same thing. Total lockdown until the big day, treats that shed like it's Fort Knox. I tried to drop a package back there once because she wasn't home, and you'd have thought I was trying to break into the Pentagon. He then slapped the side of my mailbox, a gesture of finality. Well, mail's not gonna deliver itself. See you around, Cass. And he was off, whistling a jaunty, off-key tune, completely oblivious to the fact that he had just detonated a small nuclear device in my brain. I stood there, rooted to the spot, the words echoing in my skull, each one a drumbeat of doom. Shed packed to the gills, little treasures, Fort Knox, and the absolute show-stopping finale. Final judgment, it was like a lightning strike to my already fried nervous system. Of course, the key wasn't for her house. The door opening was a misdirection, a cosmic red herring designed to throw me off. The key was for the shed where she kept the little guys, the shed that was her Fort Knox. And the final judgment, my blood ran cold. This wasn't just a coven, this was apocalyptic. Dave, in his complete and utter innocence, had just handed me the final, terrifying piece of the puzzle. The whole situation had just escalated from a weird neighborhood curiosity to a potential doomsday prepper scenario involving a tribunal of judges, and I was holding the key to ground zero. That night, a storm rolled in. Not a gentle spring shower, but a proper, dramatic thunderstorm with theatrical flashes of lightning and a soundtrack of rumbling thunder. It was, my overactive imagination noted, the perfect weather for a third-rate espionage mission. For a week, I had been a prisoner in my own home, oscillating between abject terror and a kind of hysterical curiosity. The fear of what might be in that shed was now only slightly outweighed by the maddening need to know. I couldn't live like this anymore. I had to know. Clutching the silver key, which now felt less like a gift and more like a cursed artifact, I pulled on a dark hoodie. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. This was insane. I was a project manager. I organized shelving. My idea of risk-taking was trying a new brand of coffee. Now I was about to commit breaking and entering, or at least trespassing with intent to be terrified. Every rational part of my brain was screaming at me to stop, to go to bed, to call the non-emergency police line in the morning and sound like a complete lunatic. But the image of that shed, of the final judgment, pushed me forward. I slipped out my back door, the wet grass silencing my footsteps. The fence between our yards was laughably low. I was over it in a clumsy, graceless vault, landing with a soft squelch in Gwendolyn's prize-winning petunias. Sorry, Gwendolyn, I crept across her yard, my back hunched, moving from the shadow of one cheerful garden gnome to the next. The rain plastered my hair to my forehead. First, I had to confirm my theory. I crept up to the back door of the house, the one that had started this whole mess. With a trembling hand, I inserted the silver key into the lock. It didn't fit, it wouldn't even go in halfway. A wave of something, disappointment, relief, washed over me. So the door was just a coincidence, a faulty latch, a gust of wind. The rational explanation was so boring it felt like a lie. Then I turned my attention to the shed. It stood at the back of her property, a simple, windowless wooden structure. It looked completely mundane, which somehow made it even more menacing. This was it, the heart of the mystery. I took a deep breath that was half rainwater and half pure fear and walked towards it. The lock was a heavy, old-fashioned brass padlock. It looked sturdy, impregnable. Except for the keyhole, which, even in the flickering lightning, looked suspiciously perfect. My hand was shaking so badly it took me 3 tries to get the key into the lock. It slid in. A perfect, seamless fit. I turned it. With a heavy, satisfying clunk, the padlock sprang open. My breath hitched. This was it, the point of no return. I lifted the heavy lock off the hasp and slowly pulled the shed door open. I was expecting anything. A sacrificial altar, cages, a wall of survivalist gear and gas masks. What I was not expecting was whimsy. The inside of the shed was a breathtakingly intricate miniature world. It was a tiny, perfectly rendered village populated entirely by garden gnomes. There were dozens of them, gnomes fishing in a little resin pond, gnomes having a wedding in a tiny church, gnomes reading tiny newspapers on tiny park benches. It was the most ridiculously charming, detailed, and utterly non-threatening thing I had ever seen. On the walls were blue ribbons and framed certificates from something called the National Garden Gnome Diorama Competition. The floorboards behind me creaked. I spun around, my heart leaping into my throat. Gwendolyn stood in the doorway, silhouetted by the lightning, holding a small tray with a half-painted gnome and a tiny paintbrush. She wasn't angry, she just looked utterly bewildered. "Caspian," she said, her voice full of confusion, "what on earth are you doing in here?" She flicked on the overhead light, flooding the scene with a harsh, fluorescent glare. Are you also a fan of the Champion Shed?" My brain stalled. The what? She pointed to a small, polished brass plaque nailed to the outside of the door. right next to the hasp I had just violated. I hadn't even seen it in the dark. Engraved on it in the same elegant script as the key were two letters. CS Champion Shed, she explained, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. It won the regional title 3 years in a row. The key must have fallen off my ring when I was weeding near the fence last week. I've been looking everywhere for it. The whole elaborate, terrifying narrative I had constructed in my head collapsed into a pile of dust. The key, the little guys, the judges, the final judgment, that was apparently the official name for the final round of the competition. It all crashed down on me in a wave of profound, soul-crushing stupidity. Final update, so it's over. The mystery is solved. CS stands for Champion Shed. The back door that opened on its own has a faulty latch, which Gwendolyn says she's been meaning to fix for months. The little guys are her ceramic garden gnomes. The final judgment is the final round of the National Garden Gnome Diorama competition. I am the biggest idiot on the face of the planet. Gwendolyn was surprisingly nice about me breaking into her gnome sanctuary. I think she was more flattered than anything that someone took such a dramatic interest in her hobby. She even invited me to come see her compete next weekend. I politely declined. I think I've seen enough. I am now officially the neighborhood weirdo. Dave the mailman saw me talking to Gwendolyn outside the shed this morning and gave me a look that was a complex cocktail of confusion and pity. I can feel the story spreading through the Suburban Telegraph already. I'm the guy who broke into the gnome shed. There's no coming back from that. I'm putting the house on the market next week. Don't ask, I'm too tired.